This is the Fluance Ai60, an affordable powered speaker that's geared towards the real-world enthusiast. But this isn't going to be your typical zero fidelity review. And I say that because on one hand, this speaker offers exceptional performance for the money. But on the other hand, there's some problems that we need to talk about. So I'm going to take you guys on this journey with me. Let's skip all of the normal introduction formalities and just get straight to the review. So yeah, let's roll the intro. Alright everyone, so as always, before I talk about performance, I want to briefly go over what it is that you get with these speakers. And since somebody's already done an unboxing video and has shown off all the little accessories, I'm going to bypass that just to keep things short and sweet. And the first thing that I want to focus on is build quality. I know you guys can't tell from where you're sitting, but these things are incredibly well made. There's a lot of heft to them, the veneer seems to be well done, and everything seems to be buttoned up together very nicely. The fact that you're getting this for $299 is exceptional. I mean, well done, Fluance, because I know $500 and even $1,000 products that aren't this well made. Now, focusing on the design, this is going to be a two-way acoustic suspension design. We're going to have a 1-inch soft dome tweeter on top. We're going to have a 6.5-inch woofer beneath it. And over here, you're going to notice our little volume knob. You can also press this in and switch it to select different inputs. Moving to the back. So what you're going to notice here is going to be a plate. Now this houses the Class D amplifier that'll output roughly 50 watts per speaker. Now if I didn't tell you it was Class D, you'd probably never know because this speaker doesn't sound like it's fronted by a Class D amp, but more on that later. Now on top here, you're going to notice our Bluetooth pairing button, so you can stream via Bluetooth to the speakers. And even though it's not a Wi-Fi speaker, you can do Wi-Fi casting through certain devices like Google Home, Amazon Echo, and Apple TV, which is pretty cool. We have a micro USB input, we have our optical input, we have an analog input, a sub out, which I know a lot of you are going to like, and then we have our normal speaker terminals, and this is how you're going to connect this speaker to the other speaker. Now please note, the one with the amplifier and the volume knob is going to be the right speaker. So if you want to listen to these in correct phase, you're going to want to make sure that this is on the right. Most importantly, we have our Canadian flag. Okay, well, maybe second most importantly, this is probably going to be one of the more important things, which is a little remote control. Look at that. It even has adjustments for treble and bass. Pretty cool stuff. So overall, this seems to be a very high functioning speaker. And now let's talk about how it actually sounds. So I'm going to start off this assessment with a very honest confession. Back when I got into this hobby in the early 2000s, Fluance speakers were maybe only half a step beyond white van speaker status. I mean, the products just weren't very good back then. And before I accepted these for review, I admit that I called a couple buddies of mine to get impressions on whether or not Fluance has changed. Suffice to say, they have changed. The Fluance of old is definitely very different from the Fluance of today, and these speakers offer a lot of performance for the money. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by focusing on how they perform in a desktop environment, since I think that's where most of the interest is going to be anyways, and then I will briefly go over how they perform in more your cliched hi-fi setup. But first, let's start off by going over the character to these speakers, because that's going to translate into the sound that you experience regardless of how you use them. So when it comes to their character, they're going to have a distinct V curve to the sound, meaning the treble is going to be boosted and the bass is going to be boosted. But overall, what you're going to experience is a rich and warm presentation. These speakers aren't going to be for the audiophile who's trying to discern every single little detail and to get the most neutral performance that they can for the money. This is for somebody who says, hey, I want something that's small, something that's full sounding, I want it to be warm, and I just want to have fun with the music listening experience. That is who these speakers are for. Now, going into detail, in the desktop environment, let's focus on driver integration because that's pretty important. And the driver integration between the tweeter and the woofer up close is very good. I don't think anybody's really going to complain about it. When it comes to imaging, in a near field environment, the imaging is good. Now, is it going to wrap around you like, say, a set of Amphion speakers? No, but I think it's going to be adequate and there's going to be decent focus in between the speakers in that environment. And again, I don't know of anybody who's going to complain. Dynamics is going to be good. Again, the speakers are very close to you, so you're probably not going to be that sensitive to it as you would in more of a traditional hi-fi setup. But what I want to do now is switch gears and to focus on the individual elements of the speaker. Starting with the treble. The treble, as I mentioned before, is going to be tilted up. But due to how the speaker is voiced and due to it using a soft dome tweeter, I don't feel like it's overly aggressive in the sense of it being sibilant. But it is very lively, and honestly, I think this voicing is smart for something at this price because that's what a lot of people want. They want something that's lively and exciting. They want the music to have a sense of occasion to it, and that's what this voicing provides. Moving on to the mid-range is going to be very full and warm sounding. Now, if I wanted to be pedantic about it, I could say that, well, it does kind of oversaturate things a little bit. It does make, like, say, male vocals sound like they've gained just a little bit of weight. But again, this is for listening fun, and in that context, it's pretty acceptable. And then we have the bass, and the bass is what most people are going to focus on because the bass is incredibly strong and very well extended for a speaker that's sealed and just really a speaker at this size. If you like bass, you're going to love these speakers. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if many people find no need for a subwoofer whatsoever. In fact, you're going to notice that Fluance has these rated down to 35 hertz. And yeah, I would say that these can dig down into the 30s pretty well. But let me make this clear. Just because they can dig down into the 30s doesn't mean that they can do it with absolute authority. Even with DSP, even with room gain, if you put them near a wall, you're not going to get the same kind of output that you would from a much larger speaker, like say the Tecton Double Impact. It's just pure physics. If you want a lot of real bass, you're going to have large radiating surface area, a larger cabinet, etc., etc. But still, what they do for their size and for the money is pretty awesome. Again, it's not about linearity, it's more about just having fun. I think some people may find a bass to be too much of a good thing, but that's what tone controls are for. But overall, I would say that, yeah, these are very well-rounded speakers, and they make for an enjoyable listen, whether or not you listen predominantly on YouTube, whether or not you listen to MP3s. It accommodates, I would say, the normal desktop listening habit profile. So yeah, these are going to be very good speakers. And now, let's transition over to how they sound in more of a traditional two-channel setup. Okay, so I'm going to keep this as short as possible for a couple reasons. Number one, the character that I just described remains mostly the same when you use them in more of a traditional two-channel setup. And then number two, I'm just going to be blunt. I feel like these speakers are better for desktop use or maybe as a soundbar replacement or something that you use for a bedroom or a living room to where you're not going to be that critical about the listening experience. Because if you are going to be critical about it and you're going to sit in your chair and listen to these speakers expecting the best listening experience on planet Earth, you might be in for disappointment because, number one, let's talk about the imaging. While it's good, it's not really that amazing. In fact, the soundstage is more or less limited to the physical plane of the loudspeakers, and while they do a decent job of locking in a center image, you really do have to point them towards you in order to get the maximum effect. And that's going to change the voicing a little bit. It's going to make the speaker a little bit more aggressive sounding, which leads me, of course, to the treble. Funnily enough, when you're close to the speakers, you're going to notice that the treble's lively, but it's not going to sound disconnected. But when you put some space between yourself and the speakers, well, now the tweeter is going to draw more attention to itself. And while it doesn't become bright, you're going to notice that, oh, there's a tweeter, there's a woofer. So the driver integration becomes a little bit compromised. Then, of course, you have dynamics. This is going to be a compact sealed monitor in a big room or even just in a moderate sized room. It's going to start sounding as small as it is. And while the bass response is still going to be strong, it's not going to be as strong. And plus, let's talk about the fact that, when it comes to listening at loud volumes, if you're somebody who loves to crank the music, this isn't really going to be the best solution in more of that cliched two-channel environment. They sound good at moderate to low volumes, but when music starts getting complex or you just want to crank it, yeah, this is where they start to fall apart. And that leads me to the caveat. So you know what? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off and get right to it because there are some things that you guys need to know. So here's the deal. These speakers, especially when used in a desktop environment, do a lot of great things. In fact, they're so good that this would actually become my go-to recommendation for people looking for this kind of solution, if not for the following problems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the most innocuous problem first and then work my way up, starting with functionality. The thing I notice about these speakers is that they don't remember what input they're on when you turn them on and off. So if you turn the speaker off and then turn it on again, well, now you have to go through and select the input that you're on. Inconvenient, not a big deal, just a minor complaint. But also, even though this speaker allows you to adjust the treble and bass from the remote, there's no screen, so you actually don't know where your settings are. You just kind of got to listen for it. Again, it's not a deal killer, just more annoying than anything else. But now let's move on to the next problem, which is noise or hiss. Now, active speakers, especially affordable active speakers, tend to suffer from this, and these are of no exception. But the thing you need to know is that if you're to use the volume control that's included here, as you turn the volume up, the noise becomes extreme. You're going to hear a lot of hiss, whether you're up close or whether you're 5 or 6 feet away. So the best way to subvert this is to barely turn the speakers on and to use a separate volume control, a preamp, whatever. You're still going to get hiss, but at least it'll be more or less acceptable to the point to where, depending on your hearing capacity, you may only hear it when you're in a completely silent room, but you need to know about that. But the last thing that you need to know about is this speaker uses DSP to help achieve that deep bass. And in my experience, especially in more of the 2-channel environment, that DSP can sometimes go absolutely crazy. There were a couple of occasions to where the volume started changing on its own. Whenever I'd listen to music that's dynamic, it would just start distorting. It's like the DSP is working so hard to give you the correct response that it goes in the opposite direction and just sends pure distortion to the woofers, even at moderate to low listening levels. Now, I tried various different gear combinations to see if there wasn't a mismatch going on. I checked to make sure that there was no lines crossing between the power supply cable and the other cables that I'm using. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any consistency. The DSP would just sometimes have a mind of its own. And that's a pretty big problem, and that leads me to my final thoughts. Okay, so real talk. Whenever I run into problems like what I just mentioned, I always reach out to the manufacturer, the distributor, or the PR agent to let them know what's going on. And this is to give us an opportunity to discover the source of the issue. Is it on my end? Is it the product? Do I need another review sample to see if I can replicate the issue? And most of the times, that's what companies do. They want to make sure that they can resolve the problem before the review goes live. Now, to be fair to Fluance, when I reached out to them and I told them about what's happening, they said, you know what? We want an honest review, so go for it. Now, I think that's pretty cool. I tip my hat in respect to the company. Most companies aren't that confident and bold, so that's pretty cool, but it doesn't change my frustration because when it comes to raw performance, these speakers are so close to being exceptional and just such an easy recommendation for people who are looking for a desktop solution or maybe a bedroom solution or whatever. But unfortunately, they have some big problems. Now, the functionality issues, whatever. Those are just small little complaints. The noise, I wish it didn't have any noise, but at least there's a way to subvert the amount of noise that you're going to hear. But the DSP problems, that's very troubling. And you know what's crazy? I didn't experience any of those issues in the near-field setup. In the near-field setup, no, it was just fine. DSP was doing its thing and doing it well, but in the traditional hi-fi setup, that's when it kept going crazy, and it didn't matter what components I used, it would just occasionally pop up. It is what it is. So that's going to be the Ai60. It's going to be a product that has, honestly, a lot that's worth celebrating, but there are some issues, and if Fluance gets around to resolving those issues, they're going to have a monster value on their hand. Anyways, guys, that's my take on these products. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace. Alright guys, so I'm adding this bonus section because, quite frankly, I'm not used to posting videos that can be interpreted as being negative. So here's what's going on here. Number one, I need to emphasize the fact that this speaker does have a lot going for it, especially when it comes to build quality, features, and sound. It delivers this very full range presentation in a desktop environment. It's very fun and engaging to listen to, and honestly, it's what a lot of people are looking for, especially for something at this price point. I mean, the fact that you can get this kind of sound for the money now is ridiculous. Just absolutely ridiculous, because when I got into this hobby a long time ago, for 300 bucks, dude, there was nothing I could get that could come anywhere close to this, even in the used market, really. And it's just a shame that there are some issues. Now, to be clear, I am going to leave the door open for revisiting this product later on. Who knows? Maybe I just had a bad sample. It happens. But I wanted to go through with this review anyways, because not only did Fluance give me the thumbs up, but more importantly, I wanted to share with you all an experience that's very much in line with a real-world customer experience, while also trying to make it an accurate review, if that makes any sense. But nonetheless, this is where I'm coming from. Hopefully that gives you all some context. And yeah, for real this time, take it easy, guys. And I look forward to posting up the next review. Peace.